Okay, so hi everyone. My name is James Cairns, and I am the program coordinator of the Law and Society program. And I'm going to say a little bit more about the program and what to expect and some of how it works. But before I do that, I am thrilled to say we have three excellent Law and Society students who have joined us and are contributing their time today. And I would like to just first go around and allow them to introduce themselves. So Kiana, take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kayana. I am in my final year of Law and Society at Laurier University. And I'll pass it over to Sarah.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah, and I'm in my third year in the Law and Society program.
Julia?
Hi, I'm Julia Almeida. I am also in my third year of the Law and Society program, and I will throw it back over to James.
Great. Thank you so much, all three of you, for participating. I have no doubt that the best way to introduce our program is for you to hear from students. But let me just briefly introduce myself and then say something about how I think about law and society as a field of study, as well as a little bit about the kind of jobs that it can prepare you for as you're looking ahead to not only what it might be like to be in the program, but what sort of things that can prepare you for as you look into the future. So I've been a professor at Wilfrid Laurier in Brantford since 2009. So I think that makes this my 11th year or maybe my 12th year or something like that under the strange COVID times. I can't even tell you what day it is, let alone how many years I've been at Laurier. But my research and my teaching background is around social movements, government institutions, and theories of democracy. And so in the Law and Society program, and I should start by saying, we'll often refer to it as LY, and that's because the course code of Laurier classes for Law and Society is LY. And so when I say that I teach LY 101, that class is Introduction to Law and Society, the second part of a two-part thing, which means that if you do end up joining us in the LY program, I will look forward to connecting with you soon as a professor in LY 101. So what is law and society? It's a massive question. And if you come into the program, you'll spend years thinking it through, and different professors, I think, will define it in slightly different ways. Different textbooks will talk about it in different ways and so on. But I think that a good starting point is to say that this is a discipline or an area of study or an intersection of disciplines that's interested in law, both as an expression of a particular kind of society, as well as a force that then shapes that society in different ways. So as opposed to what you might immediately think of as training for law school, LY or Law and Society isn't just about studying the legal code or studying how courts work. It's about asking a bigger question like, why has this particular legal code or court system developed rather than a different one? Or why have courts and police and prisons and so on developed at all in this society, given that they haven't existed in every society across human history? And what is it that these institutions, as they have developed, then done to shape the society that they have grown out of and within? And so to try to make it a little bit more concrete, the way that I've been thinking about it lately, I find the current Black-led uprising against systemic racism and police violence a really powerful inspiration for thinking about what we can learn through taking a law and society approach. The movement for Black Lives is saying this legal system is oppressive. It's not so much the argument that it's not working right. It's saying that it's working right for the social purposes that it was built. So things like the theft of Indigenous land, the disciplining of Black and Indigenous bodies, the protection of private property, and so on. And the uprising, I think, pushes us to address the question, well, what is the relationship between law and legal institutions on the one hand, and racism, sexism, and other forms of inequality alongside? What's the relationship between those things? How do they influence and affect one another? Now, some will be critical of protesters framing law and society in that way. And they will say, no, 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 the police can be reformed to be a force for good, even though there are problems, or legal institutions themselves are not actually racist. There are other elements that of racism in society that can be addressed in different ways. But in order to make that critique of the movement for Black Lives means, I think, working from a law and society perspective, because it will require being able to explain not just the legal code, but being able to draw broad connections between social trends, social problems, legal institutions, as well as developing a pretty clear sense of how does positive change happen? What is required for reforms within the system to take place? And so the key point in giving you this example is not to suggest that you need to arrive at one or another answer or definition or perspective, but rather to say that this program sees law and society as being tightly interconnected rather than separate entities that should be studied separate from each other. The kinds of themes that I'm introducing here are focused on in much more depth in individual LY classes. And just to be clear, I don't want to get way down into the nitty-gritty of exactly how many course credits of this kind or that kind a student needs to finish the degree. Those are questions I'm happy to talk about if you want to email me, and I'll give you my contact information at the end. And certainly registration services and enrollment and recruitment and so on, we'll have all kinds of information about that. But generally speaking, the way I think it helps to think about it is that all students are required to get to complete 20 credits by the time they complete their degree at Laurier Brantford, and a credit is sorry, I should say a single course is 0.5 of a credit. And now I am getting down into the weeds, and so I'm just going to stop with that. But it's not that you need 20 courses. It's more like 40 courses, 20 credits. And half of those are required to be LY courses, credits, 10 of the 20, by the time that you graduate. And what that means is that half of your courses can end up being electives from other programs, whether that's criminology or youth and children's studies or journalism or social and environmental justice or other programs that are available on the campus. And many students, actually, I don't know whether maybe any of the students that are with us can talk about if they are pursuing a minor in another program or what can be called an option sometimes, which really just means a package of other courses from other programs. I know that's complicated, and as I say, I'm sorry if that ended up making things more confusing than it needed to, but I do want to give people a sense of what it means to complete the degree, both taking LY courses and courses from outside the program. There are a slate of required courses that is true of any major, as well as, so things like what is law and society, introduction to the Canadian legal system and so on. But then there are ones that are more focused on individual topics or issues like law and social movements, famous trials, environmental law, international law, women rights and family, alternative dispute resolutions. And it's funny, as I was putting this list together, it occurred to me, I actually don't know whether these are the courses that students best love. And the students are going to tell you which courses are their favorites. And maybe I've got it all wrong. But if I were an LY student, I think these are some of the ones that I would want to take. They sound pretty neat. And so just to wrap up, two more things. One is, I said at the start, what can an LY graduate do upon graduation? What sort of jobs do LY graduates look toward? I'm just going to give you a sample of some of the careers that our graduates have pursued. And yes, I recognize from the top that some of them require additional training. That's true of any undergraduate degree, that often in order to become an immigration officer or a police officer or a social worker or something like that, additional training is required. But I think that there is a broad range of possibilities that LY graduates look toward that include things like being a child protection worker or working as a civil servant within a ministry of the government, whether at the provincial, federal, or municipal level, being a community program developer, a correctional officer, a court reporter, a human rights advocate, an immigration officer, a lawyer. I mean, Law and Society program itself is not the official training to become a lawyer. That's law school. But many LY students go on to law school. And I think that we have at least one, if not more than one on the call today who can talk about that are looking ahead to law school. A legal administrator, a mediator, working for a nonprofit organization, being a paralegal, a police probation officer, a public policy analyst, a victims' rights advocate. And so I could go on and on. I'm just trying to give you the sense of how many possibilities there are. LY is one of the strongest programs at the Laurier Brantford campus. It is popular, well enrolled, and has a strong student organization called the Law and Society Student Association. And I really think that that's one of the great strengths and benefits and advantages, and should be one of the great draws of the program. And so I'll just turn it over to Kiana to say a little bit about what the LSSA is, the Law and Society Student Association, because Kiana is currently the president. So Kiana?
Thank you, Dr. Cairns, for that. So I am the president of the Law and Society Students Association for this year. Basically, our student association is just a student-led group on campus that does everything for students, as well as we work along with faculty too. But pretty much any needs that any students has, we're here to address it and help you figure it out. We run a lot of programming throughout the semester, throughout both semesters. We've introduced some new things this year, such as peer mentor groups for incoming first-year students. We brought back our law school students, LSAT Buddies student group that just focuses on supporting students looking to apply to law school and looking to take that test, and various other networking programs. So just a lot of things that go on in our association. If you're interested in looking into that more further, you can follow us on our various social media pages. It's pretty much just LB LSSA on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And we'll be sending out stuff all year long, and you can just get ahead of that.
Amazing, thank you. And, you know, I think it's a testament to how dedicated the student group is that even under the present conditions of emergency remote learning, which are far from ideal and pose all kinds of new challenges, we have the LSSA stepping up to be able to help to build that student community and do that extra outreach that students, I think, are really craving, especially as we are not on campus at the moment. So I just have a couple of questions that I thought I would go around and throw out there to our students that are with us to get them to give you a little bit more of a sense of what it actually feels like to be a part of the program. So Sarah, why don't I ask you first? If you could tell me something about what is your favorite part about being an LY student, or something about your favorite course in LY.
Yeah, so I think a lot of things you already mentioned actually, of learning about those interactions between law and society, and how you can make those connections between the real world and what we're learning in class as well. And it's really fascinating to me, at least. And in terms of, I'd say my favorite course so far has probably been criminal law in Canada with Melanie Banks, actually. And if you ever get a chance, she's a great professor.
Hey, all right, putting in the plug. That's excellent.
Yes.
Thank you, Sarah. What about you, Julia? Same question.
Yeah, I definitely think, and I have even talked to Sarah about this before, but I think even being an LY student, just all of us being in such a popular program, but even like as your years go on, I feel like it's something that's not really talked about. Like as your years go on, you end up being in smaller and smaller classes, and so you end up with a good amount of like the same students you may have started with, and like it's just interesting to be able to like share such commonalities with them and like such interests, and like whether you guys are on the same kind of career path in terms of where you're going to go after school or not, you at least just like have someone to share like ideas with and thoughts with and opinions with. And as we said, like there's just so many interesting courses to take, and like Sarah even mentioned about the the interactions that law and society have like with each other. It's just really fascinating to learn about,
Mm,
and it just opens the door to like so many other like connecting possibilities and like different things to study.
mm.
And I think in addition to Melanie Banks being a great professor, I also really enjoyed taking famous trials, which I know Dr. Cairns mentioned. It was a really interesting class that I took with Thomas Rose,
Mm.
who is he's a very good professor, very thorough, knows his stuff. So yeah, it's a very good course to take as well.
That's awesome. This is amazing. It's actually really nice to be able to say that I get to go and tell Melanie and Thomas and whoever else gets mentioned about the good news or the good words that were passed on. Julia, I'm really glad that you mentioned what you just did about the importance and the power or the strength of being able to see a cohort move through like that. And although it's true that there can be large classes, especially at the early in the first year or the second year, I mean, one of the real strengths of Laurier Brantford is being a relatively small campus. As a professor, it's such a joy to be able to see students progress and to not only recognize them, but to know their name, to know what their future aspirations are, and to see them develop as thinkers and learners and members of the community from year one in through to the end. And so I'm glad that you pointed that out, and it's certainly something that I would agree with. Kiana, your favorite part about being an LY student and a course?
I think my favorite part is definitely just the ability to enhance your degree, both in our program and on our campus. So
Hmm.
our program has such a great ability to merge with other programs on campus. And so, like you mentioned before, I'm actually doing a double major in like law and society is my first program, and then I took on a double major in human rights in my second year.
Oh, great.
And then I also got to kind of throw in a minor and a specialization. And it sounds like a whole lot of work, but it was half of the time it kind of just happens and you sign on and you're like, oh, yes, I do have this. So I think that's definitely one of the strong suits of our program. It merges so well with other fields of study, and you get to really enhance your degree to however you like. A lot of kids are taking things you programs that you wouldn't even think of, like history, or psychology and English and stuff like that. And so sometimes it can be something you're passionate with and something you just have a hobby with. And sometimes it can be things that just merge automatically.
Yeah, that's great. So you're doing a double major and a minor?
Yeah. So
What's your minor in?
minor in crim, and then I did a specialization in international development.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that's great. Okay, I have next round of questions starting with you again, Sarah. I would love to know, I think that, did you all say that you're, what year are you in now, Sarah?
Third.
Oh, you're in
Julia
your
and I
third
are
year.
in
Okay,
third.
that's what I thought. You two were in third, but Kiana's, this is your final year, yeah? So you're in a slightly different place than Kiana, but when you look ahead to graduation, what are your plans for after?
I was just going to mention that I also am in the same boat as Kayana, minus the specialization, but
Okay.
I've taken those courses and or those the programs, and I'm also I guess my hope is to go to law school and eventually become a lawyer. But I always say like I don't really know specifically what I want to do in law. Because anything can happen. You can end
Yeah,
up anywhere, but as long as it's in the legal field for me.
great. Thank you. Julia?
Um, See, for me, I haven't particularly figured out exactly what's to come after. I'm still trying to narrow down kind of like the specific fields that I'm interested in law, and like if I were to become a lawyer, like what I'd actually want to practice and what like interests me the most. So I've like dabbled in the idea and thought about of like going to college after and like doing the paralegal program, possibly like
Yep.
Mohawk. I know they offer it there, so I thought about doing that and like maybe getting some experience for a couple years and then maybe going to law school later, because we all know it's also expensive,
Yeah.
and and all the time it takes to study for the LSAT as well. But definitely being a lawyer is somewhere in there, so an idea that I have, but I haven't quite figured it out yet, which is also okay. No,
Yeah,
sorry.
absolutely. I was actually just going to say, that can always be hard when you're put on the spot and feel as though if you don't have a very concrete answer, you're making some kind of mistake. But I
Mhm.
actually think that in many ways, it first of all is probably much more honest than about where lots of people are. They just don't know. But also that, there is no pressure to be, especially when you're in your third year. But lots of people, if we look at something like the job data that shows us how frequently people are changing jobs within the first 5-10 years after graduation, that the likelihood is that you'll do a number of different things. And I think the nice thing about this degree is that it certainly opens lots of doors that mean that there are all kinds of different possibilities that you could pursue. And not knowing right now and seeing what happens as things proceed, I think is a very healthy place to be. Kiana, you're a bit closer to graduating. What are your thoughts?
So I'm currently in the process of applying to a couple law schools across Canada. And when I started off in LY, I wasn't 110% sure where I wanted to go. I was definitely thinking law, but as I continued on with my degree and all the opportunities that we have on campus, it really kind of finalized and confirmed that to me. So definitely kudos to LY for that. And let's see where we go in a couple months.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing too. Okay, my last question. I just wondered if any of the three of you, wanted to say something about uh, l- life of a student or being a student at Laurier Brantford, because in as much as, of course, the focus here is on the Law and Society program. In order to be a member of the Law and Society program, you are a member of the campus community of Laurier at Brantford. And so I've said a little bit about what my favorite part of that is, and that's the sort of scale of the university, which means that there are more chances for connections and relationships to build and strengthen than there would be at a campus where there are 30,000 students or something like that. But are there other specific things that anybody's thinking, Sarah?
I think you touched on it quite well, but I mean to add to what Julia's point earlier is that it's kind of it's kind of described as a social sciences campus. So it's often that you're going to find those common interests between
Mm,
each other as well.
hmm,
I would also add that I guess in general, I guess my best experiences I think on campus would be definitely joining clubs and making those smaller connections within a group. And I think personally, through Kayana's great work, I have to praise her for a little bit, that she did a great job with leading the LSSA and how we're operating and making these things happen. And also, it's a great way to contribute to the community and making sure that our small campus can get even closer together,
yeah,
those
yeah.
connections.
Nicely said. Julia?
Yeah, I definitely obviously like agree about the smaller campus. I think it's nice because I remember when I was touring around and I like visited the University of Waterloo, which was my second choice. And I had toured there, like all I could just see were like these like massive buildings. And I
Mhm.
was just like, oh my God, like I just felt like a small fish in like the ocean. And I was just, and it's obviously very nice with professors to be referred to by your name rather than
Mm.
a number. So that's obviously a nice thing. And then as Sarah said, and then with Kayana, with also her leadership with LSSA, like it's very nice to find people that you can actually like talk to on like a regular basis, and it doesn't have to be about schoolwork and could be about
Yeah,
other things that are besides us. So you can actually get away from it for like a little bit.
yeah,
But I think even just our campus in general and like where it's located, it's just like it's different than every other one that I've ever seen or that I
yeah,
know of.
yeah,
And so it just kind of creates like a whole different atmosphere.
yeah,
It's definitely a different school, but like in the best way possible.
yeah. Nicely said. Uh, Kiana, did you want to add something?
Yeah, first of all, guys, thank you guys. You guys, honestly, every time you talk about LSSA, like I'm literally sitting here like, oh man, I'm gonna blush, I'm gonna blush. Um, I think one of my favorite things about the Brantford campus is like everyone already said, we are a smaller campus, and I actually was choosing between a huge campus. My first choice was University of Ottawa, and actually a lot of people that I know had a first choice of University of Ottawa who ended up at Laurier. So I think it's kind of
Hmm,
something special when you see a lot of students who end up on our campus, because a lot of my friends I've talked to we would have met at University of Ottawa probably if we ended up there, but I'm glad that we ended up here. And I think one of the greatest things, and I'm always so grateful for this, is not only the connections that I can make with my professors, but also the connections I can make with my community. So the Laurier Brantford team just has so many great opportunities on campus as well as off campus to enhance your degree in terms of internships and placements and even studying abroad. And because we're a smaller campus, there's so much more acceptance into those programs, and it's a lot not necessarily easier, but you have a higher chance of getting in and doing more things and adding to your resume. So for example, I got to go abroad in my third year, and that was probably the best decision I could ever make. It really enhanced my degree, as well as just like my personality and who I like plan to be and what I like. I've changed my complete like direction of my life because of it, just because of the people I met there and the experiences that I had. And then coming back and being able to meet so many new professors and meet professors that I've had before and see how supportive they are. Every single professor in our program is actually truly passionate about what they do and truly there to support you. So anytime you reach out to one of them, they're like, even if they don't remember your name, they will do whatever it takes to help you and support you. And it's just something that is truly important to me. And it shows that what I've invested into like this campus has turned around and invested back into me.
Wow, that's so nicely said, and really rewarding to hear from the position that I sit in. We've got a great mutual admiration society here that we can all just, it's nice to be able to connect and pat each other on the back over Zoom. The one thing that I got thinking about that no one has named, although I think it goes hand in hand, at least from my perspective about campuses, I don't know whether you would agree with me, but I actually think it's really a beautiful campus. I love the way that they have taken old buildings from downtown, whether that be a former bank, a former movie theater, a former library, and have converted those and reused them and built them into university buildings. And they've done so in a way that has not only provided, the sort of high-tech needs and design of a modern university, but have preserved the charm and character of some of those older buildings in Brantford too. And so if you haven't yet had a chance to visit Brantford or look at the architecture and the kind of physical layout and character of the campus, that is certainly, as far as I'm concerned, another real advantage, a real draw. So I want to say thank you for your attention. I know that we're all zoomed out at the moment, and so hopefully this has been useful. I want to say a special thank you to Kiana and Sarah and Julia. This has been enjoyable and informative. I'm just, for those of you who have watched to the end here, I'll tell you that you're welcome to contact me as the program coordinator. My email address, I'll give it to you, is jcairns, and you can see my last name up on the screen. So it's JCAIRNS @wlu.ca. And if you email me, you could send questions about the LY program, about the campus, about Laurier in general, or if people just had questions about university and university life or the application process and felt that they're not finding those answers somewhere, I'm happy to talk about that too. Don't hesitate to send me an email. So with that, I'll say we hope to see you soon at Laurier. Thanks to the participants, thanks to those who are joining us. And with that, we'll say so long. So maybe we can all wave because it's always awkward to end the Zoom call. Okay, bye everybody. Thank you. Thanks so much.